All right, we'll get started. Hey everyone, I'm Bo Dobrinsky. I think I know most of the folks that are in here. Um, this is a Q&A session with our technical consultant, Code Studio, on the second module of the new Unified Development Ordinance project. As you may already know, we have uh, been conducting engagement efforts on the release of the second module. Um, First module included proposed new zoning districts and use table and other associated ordinance provisions. The second module is our development standards. These are rules and regulations that will apply jurisdiction wide, not just necessarily in a particular zoning district. These include things like fences and walls, uh, parking, mobility, pedestrian access standards, as well as various other performance standards. It also includes our transitions and buffers. At this time, I'll go ahead and let Colin Scarf of Code Studio introduce his team and maybe an introduction to the content itself. And afterwards, we will open up for Q&A with everyone here in attendance. Just as in case you haven't used it before, we're using the Q&A function that Zoom has provided. So along the bottom, you'll see where there's three dots. You'll be able to click there and type into your question and submit, and we'll be able to respond accordingly. Thanks everyone for your attendance. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks, Bo. My name is Colin Scarf. I'm with Code Studio, so I'm the kind of principal in charge of this effort. I've got Asha McDonald with me from Code Studio as well, and then Bertrand Behizi as well. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I think we're just going to walk through a few slides just to kind of introduce the topic of Module 2 and the development standards. Behizi's going to help us with that. And then once we're done with those slides, we'll open it up for questions. So once again, thanks for joining.
Fantastic. Thanks for the intro, Colin. Asha, do you mind sharing your screen for me?
Yes, for sure. All right, can you see that?
It's loading.
Oh, great.
There you go. You can see
Awesome.
that. Thank you. Well, hi everyone. As Colin mentioned, my name is Bertrand Behizi, and tonight I'm going to provide a quick overview of what's in Module 2 of the UDO. I'll keep things at a high level so we can leave plenty of time this evening to answer your questions. But if you are interested in a deeper dive, there is a full-length recorded presentation available on the Engage Durham website. And as Bo mentioned in his introduction, Module 2 was released earlier in the spring and focuses specifically on development standards, which is, as you will find out soon, a key component of the UDO rewrite. Next slide. So we'll do our best to get to all of your questions this evening, but if we do miss anything or you think of something later, don't worry. You can always follow up with Bo and his team by emailing newudo@durhamnc.gov. And you'll also find more resources on the Engage Durham website, including the draft UDO documents and video recordings. And if you're just joining this process or want to revisit earlier topics, the Engage Durham website also has recaps of past sessions covering things like the overall project goals, potential development scenarios, and the proposed zoning framework. Next slide. So let's take a moment to go over what's included in Module 2. The 6 topics that you see here on your right are all part of Article 4 of the draft UDO. Development standards are regulations that help shape how new development looks and functions throughout the city at the site or lot level. Development standards go beyond what kind of building can be constructed or how tall it can be. They deal with how the site is laid out and how it interacts with the surrounding built built-in environment, including things like where the driveway goes, how much parking is needed, how properties are buffered from each other, and how lighting or signs are handled. As Bo mentioned in his intro, they apply broadly across zoning districts and will play a big role in ensuring development supports community goals, whether that's walkability or safety or maintaining neighborhood character. These standards are intended to address many of the conditions that determine how you experience Durham on an everyday basis. Next slide. So let's start with a big picture topic that sets the tone for how people get around Durham on a day-to-day basis, and that's pedestrian and bicycle mobility. Next slide. So in the full presentation, we take a deep dive into how the updated standards are designed to improve safety, accessibility, and connectivity for those traveling on foot or by bike. These updates reinforce the links between buildings, streets, and public spaces with specific walkway and entrance standards that adjust based on the development type. Next slide. We've also introduced new categories of pedestrian access to better support walkability in a variety of different local contexts, as you can see here. Next slide. And on the biking side of things, the revised standards require both short and long-term biking parking, scaled appropriately to the type and size of a project. Overall, these changes to the pedestrian and bicycle mobility standards aim to make walking and biking not just possible, but a pleasant, convenient, and everyday part of life in Durham. And Asha, you can skip the next two slides. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about vehicle access and parking. Next slide. So the full version of this presentation covers how these standards have been updated to better manage car use while still encouraging a shift toward more sustainable transportation modes. The new rules guide how vehicles enter, exit, and move through development sites with a strong focus on safety, like proper driveway spacing and clear lane dimensions. Next slide. So while the UDO doesn't require a minimum number of parking, and that's the case today, it does include a simplified system for setting maximums that reflect land use types and access to transit. Next slide. We also wanted to build in some flexibility in these standards, so projects can meet their parking needs in a variety of ways, such as using pervious pavement or placing additional parking spaces underground while meeting certain conditions. Next slide. We're also offering enhanced design standards to ensure parking areas are more visibly integrated, better landscaped, and more accessible. In short, all of these standards related to vehicle parking and parking lot design seek to strike a thoughtful balance. We want to meet the needs of today's drivers without losing sight of Durham's long-term goals for sustainability, walkability, and efficient land use. Next slide. Next, we'll take a look at how the UDO handles transitions between different types of development. Next slide. So this is a really important area, especially in a growing city like Durham, because it helps ensure that new development, especially higher intensity development, fits appropriately within existing neighborhoods. In the full presentation, we go into detail about how our updated standards manage transitions through tools like building setbacks, upper story setbacks, and landscaping. Next. One key change is that the old complex formulas have been replaced with clearer, more predictable tables that scale based on the intensity of developments. This makes it easier for both developers and neighbors to understand what's required in those cases. Next. We also covered updated screening standards like buffers between buildings, as you can see here. Next. As well as improvements along public frontages, as you can see here, that help soften edges, improve curb appeal, and reduce visual clutter. Next. In the proposed UDO, even small elements like dumpsters or utility boxes are now subject to better screening requirements. Altogether, these changes help support thoughtful growth while protecting the look, feel, and livability of Durham's neighborhoods. Next. So now let's zoom in on a detail that might seem minor, but actually has a really big impact on how neighborhoods look and feel, and that is fences and walls. Next. So in the full presentation, we talk about how the updated standards provide more clarity and flexibility for property owners while making sure fences and walls contribute positively to the public realm. Next. So depending on where the fence is placed and what zoning district it's in, there are clear requirements. For things like height, materials, and design. And so the goal here is really to support privacy and safety without creating walls that feel too tall or too solid or out of place in the neighborhood. There are also special considerations that we've either carried over from the existing code or introduced for things like electric fences, retaining walls, and other unique cases, again, with an emphasis on safety and integration into the local context. And so while these updates might seem subtle, they really help shape the everyday experience of walking through or living in a neighborhood. Next. So moving on to another set of standards that shape how welcoming and livable a place feels. We're gonna talk briefly about our updated landscaping and lighting standards. Next. So in the longer version of this presentation, we dig into how the updated landscaping requirements work to bring more green space into the city. This includes incorporating trees, shrubs, and preserved vegetation in a way that supports biodiversity and aligns with Durham's landscape manual. Next. Lighting standards have also been revamped to improve safety for everyone. So whether you're walking or biking or driving, while trying to minimize glare and reducing unnecessary light pollution. We've also tried to introduce some flexibility here as well with different fixture types allowed depending on the development context. And so together, the landscape and lighting standards help ensure that the built environment is greener, safer, and attractive. Next. And so let's wrap up the standards portions of this conversation with something highly visible, and that would be signs. Next. So the updated sign regulations aim to keep signage effective but not overwhelming, supporting local businesses while maintaining Durham's aesthetic character. We've introduced clear rules for different sign types that are regulated by this sign table. Next. So the first sign type are building signs like wall or projecting signs, and they are scaled based on how much street frontage a building has. Next. Freestanding signs, including monument and bracket signs, must meet specific placement standards to ensure that they're visible, safe, and do not clutter frontages along the street. Next. Last but not least, we also have special signs like roof-mounted signs or suspended signs that are allowed only under certain conditions to maintain the aesthetic appeal of the city. And so all of these sign types help reduce visual noise while still giving businesses and institutions the visibility that they need to succeed, and making it easier for all of us to navigate and enjoy the city. Next. Yes, and so that brings us to the end of the overview. Next. So thanks for sticking with me. So we'll keep the slides up for reference as we move into the Q&A portion of tonight's session. My colleague Colin is here with us, along with Bo and the rest of the team on standby to help answer any questions you might have about what we just covered in this brief overview. But before we get into the Q&A session, I just want to note that, as a quick reminder, that we'd like to keep the Q&A focused on Module 2. But if you do have any general questions about the UDO, feel free to send them to newudo@durhamnc.gov. And if you haven't already, you can sign up for the Engage Durham newsletter to stay up to date on future updates and opportunities. So now we can move to the Q&A session. And Ash, I can go ahead and project the presentation on my end.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. Are we taking questions, or are we taking written questions? How are we doing? Is it okay if people just ask questions?
Sure, that'll be fine.
Okay. Let's see how this works.
So
go ahead, Benita. Do you have a question for us?
I do.
Thanks.
And I'm
How
not
you doing?
sure that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure if in the sign section we were talking about neighborhood signs. Was that covered?
When you mean neighborhood signs, what do you mean?
So in new development, when new housing developments go in,
Uh-huh.
there's a standard for signage. At least in the old UDO, there was a standard for signage that goes in that kind of hindered what older or existing neighborhoods could do. So
Uh-huh.
I'm just asking, did that change?
I don't know specifically what you're talking about, I guess. So, maybe if you could expand on that a little bit, I can help answer it.
So most neighborhoods, they had a name, and
Okay.
so there's usually signage that's put in
Oh,
front that's encased in masonry.
okay. Like a kind of historic sign or something, kind of thing, like a plaque or
Y-
something.
Yeah,
Within
Or
the
the entrance sign on
okay.
entrance sign, yeah.
You can still do an entrance sign at the entrance to your neighborhood.
Well, my
Yes.
question was, did the old standard change as far as the signs go, or is it still the same? Because there are neighborhoods in Durham that aren't able, well, that did not have name signs or name placards at their neighborhood because they were older neighborhoods before the plan unit developments came in. And
Uh-huh.
so my question is that my concern is that it's a hindrance for older neighborhoods to be able to get a sign because of the standards that are set for the new neighborhoods.
Okay. Do you know what the like hindrances are? Because you can do it in the proposed UDO. It's called an
It's
entrance
typically
sign.
it's typically land ownership.
Okay.
There's usually because of the size of the sign, it has to be of a
Uh-huh.
certain size. It has to be encased in some sort of masonry. Um,
Okay.
but they're you know typically in older
Mm.
neighborhoods,
Yeah.
there's not the land
Yeah.
to be able to put that sign on.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, we have carried over the requirement um, for a masonry column, but you're suggesting maybe that doesn't work everywhere.
No, it
We
does
should.
not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know. Um, then it has to be located within 25 feet of a subdivision entrance. Um, is that problematic as well? Do you
When
know?
you're dealing with neighborhoods that are legacy neighborhoods in the city that were not planned unit developments,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it is an issue because the issue is of where the placement of the sign, and typically the land that's where you could put a sign is either owned by
Doesn't
city or either
exist.
owned by state.
Yeah. So it's
And
in the right of
so
way or something.
yes, and then it's
Yeah.
it's also required. The size of the sign is also very prohibitive for existing neighborhoods or legacy neighborhoods.
Like I mean, it has to be a certain size. Is that the problem? Or you want it
That's
to be
what's
bigger
No,
than
we
what's
wanted it
allowed?
to be a different type of sign.
Okay. Okay. Well, right now, there's a maximum. It can't be bigger than 12 square feet, the actual sign face itself. Um, and I guess it's really intended to go on like an entry feature wall that can't be higher than 6 feet. But it seems like you're looking for a way to put that sign maybe on something else that's not as big.
Looking for a way to put a sign that's not as big as what's required.
Hmm.
Um, and then also the space to be able to put that sign.
Yeah.
But, it's required to be of a certain size, and most of your neighborhoods, your legacy neighborhoods, aren't gonna, those signs cost a lot of money at that size. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
looking for a
Okay.
different type of sign.
Okay. Well, we'll look at that. I guess it is tricky when it comes to putting signs in the right of way, um, since those typically have to be approved by whoever owns that land, either the city or NCDOT. Um, and that can be a little trickier if it's not necessarily on private property.
Okay. Thanks for
But
the,
thank you.
yes,
Thanks for
thanks.
your question.
Looks like Thomas has a question. Thomas, if you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Thomas.
Hey, how are you doing? Bo, hello, how are you?
Good, good.
Yeah. Let me lower my hand here. I have a question about the RD3, or at least the proposed development tier of
Yeah.
RD3. Are there any regulations that will be attached or are attached to what allows RD lots to be developed with the third tier? Uh, and if the answer is yes, are they released? Did we miss it? Is it released or will it be released? And then the second part of that question is for whatever form could be built in the RD3 tier, which it looks like on a standard 5,000 square foot lot, 8 units can be built there based on, from what I see, the density standards, or at least what's proposed.
As
Um,
proposed, yes.
yeah, for whatever form, whatever structure that can be built there, will there be site plan exemptions for that structure?
Yeah, I can handle this question, Colin. So the
Okay.
uh there we are currently considering additional requirements based on some of the feedback we heard during our first round of engagement for both RD2 and RD3 options. Um, there will obviously be a requirement, an affordability requirement for RD3, like that would be the baseline. But of course, in terms of any other design standards beyond what's already shown, that has not been released yet. Still under consideration. Like I said, in the next month or two, we hope to, if there's going to be additional changes, to release that. And in terms of site plan requirements, we that will be in the final module where we go through the administrative section. Um, so currently in our UDO today, I think it's Article 3. The new version of that hasn't been released yet in terms of what requirements for those developments.
Is there a sense of timing on those
So
requirements?
that administrative section will be included in the final draft that we release, and so that'll be the fall, most likely for that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Bo. Yeah, Jennifer had a similar question. We have another question from Alan. Alan, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, first of all, thanks for doing this. Quick question, and I apologize if you already went over this, but I'm just wondering, a small building, say in downtown Durham, um, if you've got the side of a brick building, can you use that for a mural and or sign, or both, so to speak, or do these same there are restrictions on that as well?
Oh, how would you deal with murals in today's ordinance?
Under today's ordinance, it would be art and wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't require a sign permit. Um,
Okay, so I'm imagining something that might be somewhere in between. In other words, if so say a business has something that's fairly abstract, but it's associated with their marketing, um, or even if they wanted to put the name of their business on the wall, does that
It
start
gets it gets a little
getting
trickier.
restricted?
Yeah. When you start putting, a company's name or something on the mural, especially, if it's the company name of the business that's doing business there.
Hmm.
Um, I would suggest at that point it becomes a wall sign, for example. It's painted on the wall.
Okay. So historically, Durham is known for that type of thing, but I guess now we're discouraging that. Is that correct?
so
No.
there's a painted sign permitted in the proposed code.
Okay.
Um, there's some restrictions on size, um, based on the size of the building as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
painted signs
So
are good.
I'll look for the details in the code.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Just to add to what Bo said, painted signs are permitted in commercial mixed use and I think and commercial districts, and I think that would include
Yeah.
downtown.
And what are the size requirements basically for?
I have the draft up. I can quickly look at that real quick. Um, just give me 1 second.
I did have this pulled up, but it's disappeared on me.
No worries. I have it here. So these are the size requirements. So for the total sign area in a non-residential district, a maximum one sign per lot, or 30 feet of building frontage, whichever is greater. The individual sign dimensions, it looks like it's non-residential is 60 square feet. Building sign are paint on exterior building. Let's see about wall space. Yeah. Colin, I know in other jurisdictions we have, correct me if I'm wrong, we have introduced specific signs that like specific sign types that are related to like murals.
Hmm.
So maybe that's a discussion that we can have with the city if this is a common practice in downtown.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, I guess we have accommodated it, Alan. So if
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
looking at the draft on the painted sign, and that's our attempt to like cover that specific issue.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Looks like we have another question from Jennifer. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi. I have the same question that Thomas had. But so thanks for answering that, Bo. And then I think my other question is related to, I didn't realize I had it in module one because it's related to how some of the transitions and things are applied in module two. But particularly like whether or not the neighborhood commercial districts actually fit with some of the existing like small like corner developments at 9th Street or in East Durham. It seems to be a pretty suburban, like out parcel generic type, especially when you factor in the transition yards and things that you guys have put in this module. So I guess my question is, have you guys looked at how these would apply to infill sites? Like, do these transitions work with the existing fabric where the C-in is going to be applied and things like that? Because from first glance of looking at it, as someone who does a lot of these kinds of projects, it seems like there's a lot of non-conforming sites that this will be really hard to build on, and it may result in more buildings getting torn down instead of renovated and things like that. So I think I'm just very interested to understand how and whether you guys have looked at like traditional corner store, retail store, Durham forms in formulating that district and the standards around transitions, like having transitions between C-in and RD maybe makes sense. Having it between RX and RD probably doesn't. Like there's just some nuances here that wouldn't fit on the typical 60-foot wide Durham lot.
Yeah, we have looked at that a little bit. The city, for the most part, has been handling the mapping piece of this. So I'd have to defer to Bo on where CN is showing up and what it's adjacent to.
Yeah, I think the first part of Jennifer's question is definitely a mapping concern. I'll just say, I believe 9th Street is probably 9th Street and the surrounding areas is proposed as CX currently. The commercial neighborhood, trying to align with place types. I think that's something we're trying to get right in terms of, especially when we know that we've got existing structure, um, and we prefer to preserve that. So I think, the first step would be the mapping exercise, making sure that we are aligning with the place type accordingly, not creating a situation that as you described, like if we did CN all up and down 9th Street, that would be a problem, right? You wouldn't even be able to build what's there today. But I think the second approach, you bring up a good point about the conversion of neighborhood commercial in an existing structure. And I think some of that is probably in that later section, as it's a process or not how we treat non-conforming improvements, um, and if there's any uh, exceptions or ways to reduce the transition in those instances. And Colin, I'll let you speak a little bit more if you want to talk a little bit about the
Well,
the width of the transitions that are proposed.
yeah. I mean, I would suggest from our perspective, CN was intended more for suburban areas. In terms of how it got mapped, I'm not sure, but if we were looking at kind of infill settings, I think we would be looking more at, CX. Um, and I don't know if there's anything in particular with the transitions that you think are problematic. Um, I think in general, there's a 15-foot deep buffer area or transition area that would be required um, in kind of a infill setting. Um, do you
Yeah, I think
do you think that's too much? That's too high of a number?
I was thinking CN should certainly, it probably applies in suburban areas, but it also applies to like the corner retail shop in the neighborhood,
Hmm.
which CX would have an even bigger buffer between the house next door and that corner store, and that rezoning would never ever happen. So I think having a district that is meant for a store in a neighborhood where is important because they exist all over Durham already, and many more people would build them if they were allowed. Um, so I guess if CN's intended to be suburban, that there needs to be an infill option for those
Okay.
uses built into the
Okay.
code would be my feedback.
And
Um, and then I guess the other piece of that is I've seen in other codes when they have like build twos in this scenario
hmm
make exemptions for like improving the situation for an existing building.
hmm
So that doesn't have to meet the full build two
Yeah.
because it's improving
Yeah.
it or something like that. So those things can
Yeah.
go a long way.
Yeah. We'll definitely have that language in there um, that like helps you understand how you kind of phase in your build to requirement over time, and might let you put buildings back behind as well, right? Because you're um, before you've met the build to for the entire site. Do you think the current transition area depths are too deep? I guess right now they're for the most part they're 15 feet in a I guess in a tight infill setting. It seems like there would have to be it'd be almost like 5 feet or something in order to make that work
Yeah, I think
appropriately.
that's essentially my comment there is that 15 feet makes sense in a more suburban setting out towards South Point or something, but not in a more urban setting. It should match if it's meant to be like between RD, it should match what the RD setback is
Hmm.
for those conversions. Um,
Okay.
and then if y'all will let me ask one other question that
Sure.
came to mind as I was reading this set of standards. RD has a lot of flexibility in terms of number of units on a lot. And in North Carolina, we can now build up to 4 units under the residential code.
Uh-huh.
But the breakpoint in a lot of the standards in the table and the standards for how they get applied from the development standards here are at 2 units. And then so
Okay.
I'm wondering if you guys have considered making the breakpoint be at 4 units for a lot of these standards.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, where do we have the break? You're talking like maybe in the use table or something, the break between.
Yeah, like a lot of this, like the parking standards for multifamily, for example, would kick in at 3 units the way things are structured right now, but that may not make sense,
Okay.
is my suggestion.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate your comments. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. Following on Jennifer's question on the CX, is it fair to say that, the CX encompasses most, if not all, already commercially zoned lots in and around downtown, the urban tier, downtown tier. And based on the last text amendments that went through, residential uses can utilize RUM development standards, which takes the height up to 60 feet, if I remember correctly. But it looks like CX3, the base, by what's allowable by right without any concessions on compact or unit size, it only takes the base to 3 stories, 45 feet. Could that be considered a downzoning?
I guess we would have to understand the nuance of what the current regulations do to answer that one
I would
effectively.
believe so, sure.
Yeah.
But it just seems to make no sense that we would even consider a CX3 when already the current UDO allows up to 60 feet as a matter of
Hmm.
right. And Bo, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think in those instances, uh, it's potentially a map change, map comment. Um, you could send if you've got an example or that
I do,
example.
yeah.
Yeah, you want to send an email to new UDO.
Yeah.
We've seen some similar situations, and I don't want to say across the board that's not our intention, but certainly in some of these areas where we know we want to densify, uh, that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, I own I own property on West Chapel Hill Street, which is mostly CI zone. And it would again, it just seems common sense to think that CX3 is just it, 3 stories or 45 feet. It should the base should be 60 in my opinion because that's what mirrors the current conditions.
Yeah, and I'll just stating the obvious, as was talked about in Module One, um, the the second and third option in RD is you can like we talked about already. Those also exist for those RX and CX districts, and so we certainly want to incentivize offering the affordable housing component as well as the compact option. And
Certainly,
so
but it just seems
in some instances that
you know,
may be the approach.
100% agree with you, but just comparing what's allowable right now versus the base, what's proposed, it just seems to be that the base downgrades it.
Hmm.
Thanks,
It's
Tom.
it's a CX3 would from our perspective be kind of a neighborhood compatibility zoning district, right? That's where it would end up, right? Where we're trying to transition height from established neighborhoods that are, typically have a 3-story height limit. So that's where we would typically use a district like CX as a kind of a transitional mixed use district. So 6 stories next to, single family could be a lot. Or yeah, sorry, 5 stories. Yeah.
Let's see if we have any other questions. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Do we have any questions in the chat, or would anybody like to raise another question?
We're happy to answer questions about any of the districts. Any of the other districts, if you have any questions about that from Module 1 as well.
Can you explain how our district is changing?
Which one?
Residential rural RR.
Yeah, so that is would be substantially similar to the RA or RB districts. So Colin, if you want to maybe you speak to those two districts, but most of the RR would be converted to those districts, which is
RA.
similar uses, similar size lots.
Yeah, so the new RA district is going to have a minimum lot size of 3 acres, and then a minimum lot width of 200 feet. And then the setbacks from the street would be 50 feet. It would have a side setback of 25 feet and a rear setback of 50 feet, and a maximum height of 3 stories and 40 feet for the RA.
Yeah, and then the RR within the UGB would be the proposed RB. So.
Yeah, so that we're going to drop because it's in the urban growth boundary where the lot size would be minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet with a 100-foot lot width and 35-foot front setbacks, 12-foot side setbacks, and a 25-foot rear setback. And it would also be 3 stories and 40 feet in height.
Great. We have another question from Jennifer. She wants to confirm if we'll be accommodating urban agriculture as a separate use. And then also raises the need to allow other agricultural uses in more zones, in more districts, such as greenhouses and chicken coops. Jennifer, feel free to elaborate if I missed any details.
No, I just put it in the chat because I'd already talked a lot. But it's come up in Raleigh when urban ag became allowed. They forgot to allow any of the things that you would actually do urban ag with in the residential zone or in the like mixed use commercial zone. So just flagging it as a like need to coordinate.
Yeah. The city's working through the use material right now. So I'll let Bo answer where the current thinking is on urban ag, but I would imagine we'd want to allow it in as many places as we can. I don't know quite where the city is on the animal thing.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. Certainly, agriculture in terms of growing, but chickens and bees and all that. Yeah, it's expanding in all the areas we can. I think some of what we know we need to be really deliberate about is also making sure where it's allowed as an accessory, even in those X districts. Just making sure that the opportunity is open for as much of Durham as possible.
Yeah, and then I guess making sure the setbacks and stuff work for some of the accessory structures that might be associated with that activity.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the group? All right. Well, thank everyone for joining this Q&A session. As I mentioned previously, there are multiple ways to get in touch with our team. Let me just scroll down to that slide. Okay. Yeah, so you can either email the Durham team at newudo@durhamnc.gov, or you can stay up to date by visiting Engage Durham. Bo, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I just want to remind folks to continue to provide the feedback. A lot of good comments this evening. Use the email address that was just shared, and look forward to continuing to engage with all of you. And let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.